One, two, three, four.
You are listening to SKYLIT, the SKYLIT Books podcast. SKYLIT Books is a general interest bookstore in the Los Feliz neighborhood in Los Angeles. You can shop with us from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. or visit us online 24/7 at skylitbooks.com. Follow along at SKYLIT Books Instagram and Twitter. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening, and now on to the episode.
Hello, my lovely and beautiful listeners, and welcome to SKYLIT. This is the SKYLIT Books podcast, and I'm your host, Lance Morgan. Today, I'm so thrilled to welcome Molly Peacock to read from her new book, Flower Diary, in which Mary Hiester Reid paints, travels, marries, and opens a door, followed by a conversation with her and Donna Bailey Nurse. Before I introduce them, I want to remind you that SKYLIT Books is now open for in-store browsing, but we are following the current CDC mandate, so please bring your masks and be respectful to your fellow customers and the staff there. You can also always shop online 24/7 at www.skylitbooks.com for curbside pickup or shipping. Molly Peacock is a biographer and a distinguished poet. A fellow of the Leon Levy Center for Biography, her newest is Flower Diary, Mary Hiester Reid paints, travels, marries, and opens a door, from ECW Press, a book she spent 8 years writing and researching. Her previous biography, The Paper Garden, Mrs. Delaney begins her life's work at 72, was named a Book of the Year in Canada, Ireland, and the UK. Peacock's latest poetry collection is The Analyst Poems from W. Norton and Company. Former president of the Poetry Society of America, she's the co-founder of Poetry in Motion on New York subways and buses, as well as the founder of the Best Canadian Poetry. She teaches online for the Unterberg Poetry Center at the 92nd Street Y in New York City and lives in Toronto. Donna Bailey Nurse is a Canadian literary critic and writer. She was curator of an evening with poet Terence Hayes at the Gardiner Museum in the literary series Femme Noirs that accompanied the Michelane Thomas exhibition at the Art Gallery of Ontario. Nurse is the author of 2 books of criticism and the editor of Revival, an anthology of Black Canadian writing. She is a contributor of The Walrus, the Literary Review of Canada, and the Globe and Mail, and a columnist for CBC Radio's The Next Chapter. Nurse is currently at work on a Black Canadian history, part of a 2-book deal with HarperCollins Canada. Mary and Donna, thank you so much for being on our podcast. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear this wonderful conversation between the two of you.
Thank you for having us. It's wonderful.
No problem.
We're so glad to be here, Lance.
No, I'm so glad to have you both. Molly, before you guys go into your conversation, I know you have a reading for us, Molly.
I do. I'm going to read from the very beginning of Flower Diary, in which Mary Hiester Reid paints, travels, marries, and opens a door.
Perfect. Take
Prologue.
it away.
The open door. She left a door ajar, slipping through a threshold into the almost impossible to balance world of love and art. Over 300 paintings and a lifelong commitment to a partner. She's one of the artists from the past who made it possible to live and love in the present. Often we who look for models of creativity learn the names of those who banged down doors and wrecked their own and others' lives. And a handle is a word that belonged to this woman who made still lifes like diary pages and landscapes like dream logs. She planned and coped, sized up situations, then seized moments, managing a subtle ménage with her painter husband, George Agnew Reid, and their talented student, Mary Rinch, in a stiff society, all the while making 5 transatlantic journeys and creating some of the most devastatingly expressive works you've likely never seen. Signing them, Mary Hiester Reid. She was born on April 10th in 1854, died on October 4th, 1921, just 100 years ago this week. And she leapt into real painting, not just ladies' watercolors, at 29, when her dress went nearly from her ears to her ankles and close along her arms to the wrists. The registrar at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts wrote her name in a steady copperplate hand. Then, in the all-female oil painting class, she watched a naked woman climb on a riser and turn her back. Scrunched behind her canvas, Mary crowded for a view among the other women at this art school led by the genius and so-called libertine Thomas Eakins. Eakins allowed his female students to learn to paint by looking at bodies like their own. But later, Mary would rarely paint the human figure. Instead, she injected that figure into the flesh of flowers, curves of jars, and spines of trees. She painted blousy, sensuous, billowing roses, trapped at the necks in vases as if they were silk-gowned beauties grabbed by their corsets. Pewter jugs as solid as ironclad wills, evergreens pointed in fierce declarations, each element fully in possession of its body. And she positioned those bodies in relation to one another. And I'm going to take you to the very end of her life in her final studio in Witchwood Park, Toronto. An autumn chill in 1921. A fireside in Upland Cottage, the arts and crafts fantasy of a house designed by George Agnew Reid for two working artists, himself and his wife, Mary Hiester Reid. The couple worked side by side in these his and hers studios in a magical artist community in what's now the city of Toronto, but then Witchwood Park. George's studio was gigantic, big enough for huge murals. Mary's comfortable studio with its cozy fireplace and ingle nook led to the dining room and kitchen. That day, two young painters arrived to visit and to help. One was Marion Long, the other was Mary Evelyn Rynch, who lived in a studio house, also designed by George, just beyond the garden behind their house. Miss Long and Miss Rynch were there because Mary was ailing. Angina had plagued her for several years, and now she was dying. It was to Rynch, the shadow Mary, 23 years younger, that Mary Hiester Reid is said to have whispered an instruction that would never be entered in a will. The older painter verbally bequeathed her husband to the younger painter. George will be needing a wife. And I think she is said to have said to the shadow Mary, who was in her early 40s, it should be you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Molly. That was phenomenal. And for the audience, it's phenomenal like that all the way through. I've read it twice now, and I'll be reading it again. It's just that good. So let's get going, Molly. I wanted to see if you could tell the audience a little bit more about Mary Hiester Reid, her significance then and now, and also a little bit about her background, which is quite illustrious. I mean, how did that background allow her to create a life as a female artist in the 19th century? That's quite a bit.
You know, it's an incredible question. I mean, it's the central question that in some ways drives this whole biography, which isn't quite a traditional biography. It's a biography with three intertwined lives And it's a biography with some 21st century lives reflecting on those 19th and early 20th century lives. So it's a juicy book in that respect. So how is it that an artist like Mary Cassatt ended up living with her parents in Paris and not having a full life, with living separately in her own house, in her own marriage? Or why is it that Thomas Aiken's wife, Susan McDowell, stopped painting the minute she married him? So Mary Hiester Reid had a great example in her mother. Her father died when she was only 5 months old. And later on, as the Civil War began coming north and going toward Gettysburg, her mother takes her 2 daughters and moves to Wisconsin and raises these 2 girls in Wisconsin. And she never remarries. And she has her own house there in Beloit, Wisconsin. And she had didn't have she wasn't, I think, very wealthy, but she had enough money to live on her own and even lend money to people there. So Mary grew up in a household where there was no Victorian baritone telling her what to do, right. And also no father. So then when her mother passed away, when she was 21, she went back to the Philadelphia area and she had family, but not that insular set of parents saying, this is what you've got to do. Instead, she had a mother who had encouraged her as a painter, and she had an older sister who suddenly up and converted to Catholicism, went to Europe, stayed in Spain for the rest of her life, becoming the mother superior of a convent in Spain. So she had a sister who made this incredible spiritual choice. And I think all those examples allowed her to make her choices in Philadelphia. And I think it's not insignificant that she was 6 years older than her husband. So she had a little bit of extra maturity there and a little bit of extra clout, maybe.
I also wanted to see if you would tell a bit about the kind of family she came from, because when we say that she went to Wisconsin, it's like she's, really a Midwest girl, but in a way, not really. She came from the East. She had that kind of illustrious background. Can you talk about? And so, intellectual pursuits, artistic pursuits were not out of the question.
That's absolutely true. Her background, she's a descendant from a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Her family were the Muhlenbergs, Mussers, Hiesters, who came to the United States to establish the Lutheran Church and to help establish botany in North America. Her great-grandfather was called the American Linnaeus. He was a specialist in plants, and her family fought in the American Revolutionary War. They certainly fought for the Union in the Civil War, and those were families of prominence. When I said she didn't have tremendous wealth, I don't think she did, but she had a real social cachet. So she didn't come just out of nowhere. She came out of a real, an American social anchor.
What was her significance then and now? Like, if you were going to just introduce her today, what would you say her significance was? I
think that her significance is that she maintained 3 amazing painting styles: tonalism, Impressionism, and realism. She combined them all to her own, and she began to represent her emotional life as it invested in flowers and in objects, and later on in trees. so that she was called a sympathetic realist, or we might call her an empathetic realist now. And she, although she was an American and certainly painted in the United States as a member of the Onteora Artist Colony and the North American Arts and Crafts movement, she also lived and painted in Canada and did this remarkable work representing Canada at the Chicago Exposition, the Louisiana Exposition, the Buffalo Exposition. So she was well regarded, well reviewed, and she managed to maintain a relationship with George Agnew Reid, who was much better known in his day than she was, even though, as a woman painter, she did great. But he was, he sold probably at 10 times, sometimes even 100 times more than she sold in terms of prices of their paintings.
I'm going to talk a bit more about him a little bit more later, but I wanted to ask you, when you say this, you say the most intriguing things. I could stop every sentence and ask you. But there's one thing you say right off the top, and I just want you to explain a little bit more what you mean by this. She left the door ajar.
I think that she was one of the people who opened a door for later painters. When Georgia O'Keeffe is painting flowers and trees, Mary Hiester Reid is one of the foremothers that she is reacting against. We're not, all of us who have mother figures know that it's a tangled relationship.
Or who were mothers.
For sure. But so she's in this generation. She was the first. She's in the first generation of women artists who are married and making art. She made over 300 oil paintings. And let me tell you, you know this, Donna, from your own experience, as a writer, as a critic, it's really hard to maintain an intimate domestic relationship with another person and make art at the same time. So she opens the door to that. And then she opens the door to a woman's ambition. Ambition really is simply self-regard, I feel. And she had that self-regard. It was quiet. I think of her as a stealth feminist, somebody who was flying under the radar of a deeply sexist society in order to do what she did. But she opened the door for the rest of us. And as we struggle with the very same issues in the 21st century, we know we can look at her life and ask ourselves, well, how did she do that? And that was part of the impulse for writing this book.
I want to, right after this, I'm going to ask a bit more about George, her husband, but you did touch on her influences. And I think one of the things I love about this book, I just wish everybody could see this book. Rush out to, it's such a gorgeous production. It's such a beautiful object in and of itself. The reproductions of the paintings are just, they're luminous, right? But what I love about that is just this beautiful work that small enough to carry with me with a huge world inside it. And what I wanted to know is, how does this book contain? It contains so much life and it contains so much art. And I learned so much more I'm a lay person, so I love to learn so much more about the art world in this language. And can you touched a little bit on her stylistic influences, Japanism and tonalism. And if you could just take a few minutes to talk just a little bit more about these influences on her work.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. I'm going to make a little side leap into something else you said, which is the production of this book. This is a book for readers. It's not an art book. It's a biography, but it is produced as if with art book values. So there's an illustration, there are 34 illustrations, one at the beginning of each chapter. And the paper is really luxurious. So those illustrations really pop out, and there are beautiful end papers. And the ECW Press designed and produced this book as this little treasure of a volume. And it's a tribute to Mary Hiester Reid, and absolutely an honor to be an author, to have a publisher who put this much effort into the design of a book, to the point where there are these little interludes where I'm in the 21st century thinking about her marriage and her life, and those are in a different color. So the interludes are in this pale bay leaf green. And when I first saw this, I have to say I was shrieking with delight because of the production job. Okay, now tonalism. Tonalism, it came about, it was instigated by James Whistler. And he famously made something called the 10 o'clock speech, where at 10 o'clock at night, he announced what tonalism was. And that is a style of painting that is like creating music. So when tonalist paintings are often called harmony in such and such, and gives the color, symphony in such and such, it uses musical terms, and it uses times of day that are low lit, twilight, sunrise, rain, gray, cloudy days. I don't, even if there were even smog, all of those kind of outer weather that translates into inner weather and a whole set of emotions. And Mary Hiester Reid she adored that, and has a whole number of tonalist paintings, and carried that idea of poetic emotions, musical ideas in painting, and poetic emotions into her work. She was regularly called a poet in paint. And as a poet, I cottoned on to that right away. She was a reader of poetry. There are almost poetic rhythms in the ways she presents her flowers. And so there's tonalism, and Japanisme is another late 19th century phenomenon. And Americans in 1876, when the centennial happened in Philadelphia, had never seen art from Asia. So suddenly there's a Japan exhibit, and all of these North Americans can come, and suddenly they're seeing this art they've never seen before, and they fall in love. I mean, who's not going to fall in love with all of these marvelous, marvelous objects and styles of pottery? And she's able to obtain some of these things. She obtains a ginger jar. And then later on, when she goes to Paris, at that moment, the ukiyo-e prints, or the Japanese prints that we think of by Hiroshiga and Hokusai, things that are images that we are just sort of regularly in our lives now, were brand new in Paris, but had just come down in price enough for artists like Mary, like Bonnard, like Van Gogh, to buy these prints and have them and see how they translated a realistic volume into 2 dimensions and lines. And she also was in Paris at the same time. She was a neighbor of Eugene Grasset in a little artist community. And Grasset was the father of Art Nouveau. And I can't describe those images for you right now, but I think that many people out there will have a little bit of an inkling of Art Nouveau, and it depends on those swirly organic lines that you do see turn up in Mary's paintings as well.
Is she most known for her flowers or not necessarily?
Yes, she is most known for her flowers. As a matter of fact, people considered her a flower painter, as she was praised as a flower painter, but she also painted trees. She also painted interiors. She did wonderful, wonderful paintings of her studio, the various studios she had, of her fireplace, and always these rooms are so inviting. There are always pillows in those rooms. She also painted tables and often a single chair. And we have to remember that women didn't do that many self-portraits at the time. So her self-portraiture really comes out of painting her rooms. And we get a sense of her personality from those rooms she painted.
What about the flowers? Would you say the same thing? What do the flowers, because, you know, they're not like any flower paintings I've ever seen. So something so human, I mean, or it's more than just flower life, it's lifelike.
Yes, it is lifelike. For her, flowers, absolutely, they were embodiments of human figures. And these are some of the most electric and some of the sexiest flower paintings that you've ever seen before the 20th century. We're going back here now into the 1880s, 1890s, into the 1910s, and looking at these flowers. And I do have to say that they do reflect different periods of her life. So when they take on this very talented student, Mary Evelyn Rynch, and bring her to their summer studio in the Onteora Art Colony, suddenly she paints this magnificent small painting called 3 Roses, where 2 roses are flopping together out of this milk jug. The 3rd rose is flopping off to the side with some petals that look like teardrops on the ground. And you see the wrenching bewilderment of a love triangle invested in 3 flowers in this milk jug. Now, am I going too far? Well,
You're the expert.
Yeah. Okay. I will say that I have created chronologies of her life, her husband's life, and Mary Rynch's life. I know what they were painting, where they were, and when these triangulated flower paintings occurred. And I don't feel like I'm over interpreting here, especially since at all different points in her life, she's painting sometimes exuberantly. The flowers are exuberant and electric, leaping out of the vases and the bowls. Sometimes they are moody, subdued roses in still life. They always, to me though, always the roses look like they're wearing negligees. These petals are so silky, so sensuous. You just sometimes have the sense of looking at a rumpled bed.
Beautiful, yeah. I think we better get to that husband then. I'm intrigued by her husband. Now that, you know, I recognize him. I recognize his work as a Canadian. I just recognize that I've seen it all my life.
Sure.
And
yeah.
Not really known who it was. Can you talk to us a little bit about how they met and fell in love at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts? And
yes.
And then also, yeah, we'll talk about that. And then I also want to go on. So we're going to talk about that. But then I also want to go on and talk about, you know, why you spend so much time on that marriage in this book.
Okay. All right. So they meet at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, which is the only school in the entire world. Not in Paris could a woman do this. where a woman could paint from a nude model. But this is scandalous. There are only 3 years when this is happening because they're going to kick Thomas Eakins out for allowing this. And not only that, the models that they could hire, because it was so tough for a woman to earn any extra money at these times. I mean, basically you did it by, you could sew for other people. You could do some of the private education thing in a governess way, and you could model, but the models were older women, and they were often women who would be living on the street, much more ravaged bodies. Mm-hmm. So these younger women needed to look at a young body to see what it looked like in order to paint. So they would undress for one another. And the deal was, if I take off my clothes for the group, then the group, other people have to take off their clothes for me, and we will model for one another. This is in an atmosphere where you are dressed, you are clothed from your ankles all the way up to your chin. And just imagine, imagine yourself wearing 3 underwire bras, one over the other, around your waist. That's the corset, okay? So for these young women to take off these clothes and paint one another, this sensuous atmosphere is just pulsating. And the men are also painting male nude models, female nude models. This is a highly sexualized atmosphere for a very repressed moment. And this is the atmosphere in which George and Mary fall in love. The minute they graduate, they get married. They head straight for an economy steamship, and just sort of like bargain steamship trips to Europe. They go to Europe because they want to see these paintings that they've heard about, because it's not like they're being reproduced in special color reproductions in the 1880s. That's not happening. So they go off to see the real thing.
Okay. I think, their marriage it's a large part of the book. And I think that very often in, artist biographies, particularly of men, you barely see the spouse, no matter what the spouse is. And I also, I want to talk about their very sympathetic, cohabitation there, and respectful, artistic. And also, if you don't mind me bringing this up, you yourself with Michael, the late scholar, Michael Grodin, you had that, for me, when I'm reading it, because, spoiler alert, I already know Molly, but it's a celebration of a certain kind of marriage. And that, you do speak about your marriage as well as their marriage throughout the book. So can you talk to me about their marriage and why it is such a part of the book?
They had what was called a companionate marriage. That too was innovative. So the whole idea that you could be married to a companion person. And George Agnew Reid was super talented, super ambitious. It took a lot for him to get from Wingham, Ontario, this little farm community, all the way down to Philadelphia to study art. That was a big deal. And there was never a question that they wouldn't be painting side by side. And his respect for her carried on. I mean, as he became president of various art organizations, and he was quite a political guy, he was a big networker. She came along for his ride, so to speak. I mean, women couldn't become full members of certain art associations, but at least when he was in charge, they were admitted. They had some sort of ranking. in these art associations. So there is that, and she modeled for him many, many times. He painted her throughout his painting life, but you have to sacrifice a lot of time to model for someone, and she did. She sacrificed a lot of her own painting time for him. She was the one who threw him parties when his paintings got accepted to big exhibitions. He was the one who showed in New York. He showed in England. He showed in Paris. She did not to do those things. I mean, she did show at the international exhibitions, but those particular kind of guy meet guy in the art world invitations, she had none of that. So it was for their day. There was a great, it was egalitarian. From our point of view, we see the sexism in it, we see his supremacy, we see the ways in which she suppressed herself. But for the time, again, it was a door opener. And I thought about their companionship. And when he built a house for them, he built the house around side-by-side studios. Just in the architecture of the architecture reflected their relationship. And I was lucky enough to have a 28-year marriage side by side with an eminent Joyce scholar, Michael Grodin, and we thought about her marriage and George because I invited him to follow in their footsteps with me. So I said, let's go to Spain. The Access Canada I funded a trip to Spain to replicate her travelogue that she wrote in Spain. Let's go to Paris and see their studios. This another trip that was funded for my husband got us to Paris. We went to see all of their spaces in Toronto, and we thought about, well, what is our life like compared to what their life is like? And there's a note of sadness in there as well. And that is, we did this toward the end of my husband's life. In fact, he passed away just as I was completing this book, and the press waited for me, held up the production so that I could write a couple of those final interludes to talk about our relationship at the very end, because that was also mirroring George and Mary's relationship as she passed away and then he lived on. So it was an extremely emotional experience for my husband and me, and for me now to recollect this and what can I say? Weave all the threads. There are many. This book is a tapestry, and it just. I look at it and I think what an honor it was to be able to have those experiences.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's just, thank you so much. I don't know if we should bring up Mary at this moment, but
oh, the other Mary.
The other Mary. So you do bring up that, we should let everybody know that they both taught here in Toronto.
Yeah.
And not too far from where I used to live. You live still. Mm-hmm. And not too far from where I live now is where they moved, which was.
Yes.
And, so a young lady, Mary Evelyn Wrench, was a student of George's. And then when they went to their summer colony, which we haven't touched on yet, I don't know if you have time, but she accompanied them with a class trip type of thing. Yes. And then eventually, he was painting things that were reminiscent of her. Mm-hmm. And there was a sense of an attraction that you noted. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I thought you spoke about that was so interesting is that the seductiveness of that student-teacher bond. I mean, yes, perhaps especially in painting, which is about looking. And yes.
Yes.
Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. When Mary Rynch, and it's important to say that she was really talented and continued painting, and her
Beautiful
work
mind.
is marvelous.
Yes, gorgeous.
And of the next generation, she was painting much more modernist paintings than George or Mary Hiester Reid. So when she's 18 when she becomes George's student, he immediately paints a portrait of her. You can see the affection in the portrait. Her father died when she was quite young. He's a father figure. He then, becomes that beloved teacher. And we are all now in the 21st century aware of the power dynamic of those relationships, and what it engenders in a young woman to have a powerful, sexy mentor who's painting her portrait. And who then finds her a studio next to his studio, and is taking her to Onteora, a fabulous arts and crafts art colony in the Catskill Mountains, started by Candace Wheeler, associate of Louis Comfort Tiffany, mother of North American design. So she's there in that atmosphere, and she's being taught by her mentor's wife, who is also then a role model and a mentor, more a bit of an older sister figure, a mother figure, a rival. All of these roles are being played out all at once, and they're subtle. They are overlapping. My sense is that when the young Mary Rynch gets too close into this marriage, that is exactly the moment at which the older Reids pack up and leave for Europe. And that is a pattern that happens over and over again in their lives. So that, and from the young woman's point of view, as they leave, she can come into her own identity. It's subtle and complex. It's deeply sexist, but at the same time, Mary Rynch is allowed to grow. She comes into her own talent as well. And Mary Hiester Reid then begins a rapprochement with the younger painter. And by the time World War I comes along, the Great War, all of these, their personal relationships suddenly are in the context of a huge world war. And they start painting to show their paintings together. The two women show their paintings together because they're raising money for the troops for the Great War. They put things aside. There's a way in which a kind of mentorship, friendship supersedes the rest of it. And somehow or another, they get comfortable with the three-part romance. And I should say, nobody left any diaries. Nobody left any truly personal letters. You just have the feeling that there was a certain amount of, I feel like I say in the book, I think there's a whiff of smoke of some burning some things here. So we can't say exactly what's happening, but through other writing, through the chronology, through where they are, through their proximity, through their life choices, we see a kind of a comfortable, not all in one house, but next door to one another menage that was not acrimonious. Young Mary Rynch did a miniature portrait of Mary Hiester Reid. It is a loving, tender portrait.
However, Molly, at the end, I mean, you know.
And There's the end.
They
Now
marry, like he
Yeah.
does marry her.
he marries her.
Uh-oh, I see land. Okay, I have
Yes.
more, and I'm still gonna go through them. Okay. Critics, I want to talk a bit more about you. Critics might describe this biography as realistic, and of course, because it's true, so that's realistic. Right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think it is experimental. You're mentioning that, and I think it veers into the realm of naturalism, and naturalism in literature, where you look at the human being, also the animal aspects of the human being, bodily functions. You mentioned things like the use of a chamber pot, menstrual cloths, various methods of birth control. You tell us something, I don't know if anybody knows this. Maybe I was the only one who didn't know that women's knickers were slit at the crotch.
Yes.
So they could go to no one told that. But why do you include those sorts of details?
I do, because I want to make them alive for us. And my research into, say, 19th century birth control, which was substantial, and you could buy these little vaginal nets in advertised in newspapers. This is, of course, before the Comstock laws came in and eliminated all of that. But there were lots of, if I could describe the life of the senses, what did they smell? Of course, they smelled the horse dung as it hit the cobblestones. They smelled the fish as it came into the docks of Lake Ontario when they went down to buy the fish. What did they hear? What did they touch? What did they feel? And that's why menstrual cloths, get into the book. Clothing, the whole life of the senses that they lived, so that people reading it could have a sensuous apprehension of their lives.
Okay, this is a similar question, and it's the last question, Lance. I wanted to, there's this wonderful part in the book where Michael, your husband, is, you're talking about the way that you two talk about art, and he came in and he's asking you about something you've written, and he's saying, why this, what that, how this, and you write, well, I'm not threatened by that, basically. I'm not threatened by that. And you say the most amazing thing. I just want to say it correctly. I wrote it down. Okay. You say that doesn't bother you when someone questions you about your art. You say that your trust in your imagination is as rooted as an oak. And that's what I feel. I feel the confidence of when I'm reading this book, I'm with somebody who is confident in what she's sharing with me and in her ability to craft and a raconteur, like you really know how to tell this story. Where do you get that confidence? I mean, I want that confidence that your imagination is as rooted as an oak. How?
I have lived by my imagination as a poet, and I have written for decades as a poet, and I've studied my own creative process, of course, but also I've been the mentor to many, many different writers. And watched and observed their creative processes. I feel confident in describing the creative processes of Mary Hiester Reid and her husband and her friend, because I am extrapolating from the decades of experience I've had in observing my own creativity and in intimate conversations with many, many other people about theirs. So I feel like my instincts about what it means to produce art are on solid ground. They are absolutely rooted, and there I do feel a confidence. What I produce sometimes, I mean, I have to leave that for other people to judge, but the way to go about it, finding the time for it and doing it, I know about that.
Thank you so much, Molly. And thank you so much to SKYLIT for having us.
Donna, what a wonderful conversation. I have admired your criticism ever since I started reading it, maybe 20 years ago. Or shouldn't I say how long?
Thank you so much. That couldn't mean more coming from anybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the two of you for, I don't know, just a wonderful conversation. You guys are both just amazing to hear talk to, and just the just friendship between you guys is just amazing to hear. So thank you both for being on our podcast.
Well, Lance, thank you for making this possible. And I think both Donna and I want to thank SKYLIT Books for this podcast, for selling Flower Diary in your very bookstore.
Yes, everyone listening, go to SKYLIT or your local bookstore to go buy Flower Diary, because it is currently on sale. You could see it right in the front of the store in our podcast display right now. So just, there's no reason to not buy it, right? There's no reason to not go out there and buy it. Oh my God. But go out, get a copy. And thank you again to Molly and Donna. Do you guys have anything you would like to say to the independent bookstore community as a whole, or your local bookstore too?
Well, how about this? Thank you, every indie bookstore across this continent. Absolutely. And just thank you, ECW Press here in Canada. And I guess my gratitude as an author is profound to all of you.
And no, that's great. Donna, you?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I can talk that, absolutely. I mean, what will we be without our indie bookstores? They just keep us alive and keep us going and keep us thriving. So thank you.
No, thank you both. And yeah, to our listeners, thank you again for coming back to listening to another fantastic episode. And if you're new, thank you for coming, and please let's come back again. Listen to another episode. We are so grateful to you. To everyone listening, you have a beautiful and amazing rest of your day, and thank you.
Thank you for listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.